because I know the truth. Ain't none of you put me on the set, and ain't none of you gonna kick me off the set.
There that day?
Yes, I was. Guy rolled up, Nipsey's out signing autographs or whatever. Guy rolled up. I don't know what his intentions was. As I replay it, I just replay it over and over, and I wish I could have done something differently. I wish I'd have never left it.
I never heard that. I had never heard the Nipsey Hussle conspiracy that the Big U had that something to do with it, right? But let me get to a little deeper question. The rumor has it is that Nip came up to this guy and said, "I can't hang with you, or we can't be around because he was a rat," right?
Right.
Let me ask you a question. It's kind of harsh. Was Nipsey supposed to say that? If you're not in the streets no more, is your opinion on the streets that valid? I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand it was two things. Let me ask you this, because what bothers me the most is when people say he got killed by one of his own homies.
Nipsey's death has always carried heavy tension and a whole lot of unanswered questions. But now, after years of staying quiet, Snoop finally stepped into that courtroom and broke the silence in a way nobody expected. Word on the street is that Snoop just snitched on Big U and even exposed how he himself was tied to the situation around the murder. But the real shocker is why he suddenly chose to speak now. Let me break this down. Snoop's apology caught everybody off guard. The entire courtroom went dead silent when Snoop Dogg dropped a bomb right there in front of stunned people who couldn't believe what they were hearing. He didn't just apologize for old connections. He took it even further and pointed straight at one of the most feared names in Los Angeles street politics. Big U. Yes, you heard that right. In one wild moment, Snoop's own words connected Big U to the heated conspiracy talk surrounding Nipsey Hussle's tragic death. And the way he delivered it had insiders whispering a word they never thought would get tied to Snoop Dogg: snitch. Let's slow it down for a second. Nipsey Hussle wasn't just another rapper. He was Crenshaw's pride, a man who lifted up his community while still staying true to the streets that raised him. His passing in March 2019 wasn't just heartbreaking. It sparked a storm of rumors, accusations, and deep conspiracy theories. Some people said it was a street issue. Others believed there were bigger forces behind it. And one name that kept coming up over and over was Big U, Nipsey's former manager and a man known in Los Angeles for both respect and fear. To understand why Snoop's courtroom words hit so hard, you gotta understand Big U's position in all this. He wasn't some outsider, and he wasn't just a mentor. He was tightly connected to Nipsey's rise, and later to the tensions that came with success, territory, and fame. Now fast forward to Snoop. For decades, he's been more than a rapper. He turned into a cultural icon, a businessman, a worldwide figure. But his roots are still in Long Beach, still tied to the Crip world, still connected to the streets. So when he speaks on something this heavy, the whole world pays attention. And that's exactly what happened when Snoop took the stand. With careful, steady words, he owned up to past mistakes. He apologized not just to the court, but to the families, to the fans, and to Nipsey's memory. But then came the moment that froze everybody in place. According to multiple people who heard the testimony, Snoop pointed directly at Big U's influence in creating the environment that led to Nipsey's death. For a lot of folks, that didn't sound like a simple apology anymore. It sounded like cooperation with the authorities. And in street culture, cooperation comes with a tough label: snitching. But here's where it gets even more intense. Snoop's courtroom words didn't come out of nowhere. They lined up with whispers that have been floating around for years, from Nipsey's close friends to clips of Big U speaking on camera. Just listen to this emotional clip from one of Nipsey's closest friends who was there the day Nipsey was shot, as he said his piece with raw pain and heartbreak. That type of real-life emotion sets the tone for why Snoop's words shook people so hard. Because while Nipsey's friend had been replaying that moment in his mind for years, Snoop made the whole courtroom replay one question: was Big U truly connected to the chain of events that ended Nipsey's life? Now, to be fair, Big U has never run from these rumors. He faced them head-on in interviews, saying people twisted his story. In one clip, Big U tried to clear his name, pushing back on the conspiracy talk and saying people misunderstood what really happened. Watch how he comes off defensive and frustrated that his name is even in this conversation. But the streets never forget. And when Snoop's testimony echoed the same suspicions that had been floating around, it pushed everything to a whole new level. Think about it. For years, Snoop balanced two sides, calling for peace while still checking anybody who questioned his credibility. Just listen to that clip where he responded to people claiming he couldn't come back to his own neighborhood. That didn't sound like someone worried about losing respect. That was someone who knows his influence and knows how to stand firm. Yet in that courtroom, with the highest stakes imaginable, Snoop completely switched things up and basically handed law enforcement what they always wanted: names, connections, and context that tied things together. And let's be real, this is the kind of moment that changes everything. This move came with heavy consequences because in the eyes of many, Snoop just crossed a line you can't walk back from. But before we break down the fallout, there's something people forget: the human side of all this. Nipsey Hussle wasn't just a rapper or some street figure. He was a father, a son, a man chasing real dreams of building long-term wealth and opportunity for his community. His close friend once described how Nipsey never turned his back on his neighborhood, never walked away from the place that shaped him, even when danger was always close by. That's the real tragedy here. And that's why Snoop's apology and finger-pointing hit so deep. It's tearing open wounds that never fully healed. Because if Snoop is telling the truth, then Big U's role in this whole situation is way more complicated than anybody wanted to admit. And if Snoop stretched the truth, or worse, made things up to protect himself, then he just threw a spark into a fire that could burn down his own reputation. Either way, the fallout is explosive. But it didn't stop there, because just when everyone thought the drama hit its peak, another twisted moment from the courtroom left everybody stunned. Let's get into it. When Snoop pointed that finger at Big U, everything shifted. When he walked into that courtroom, most folks expected a polished performance. They thought he'd turn on the same charm he's had for decades, win the room, and walk out untouched. People assumed this was just another celebrity trial moment, another stage for Snoop to show he had nothing to hide. And at first, it looked exactly like that. His voice softened, his posture looked humble, and he opened with something nobody expected from him in years: an apology. He talked about his past, about the impact of his music, his words, and his influence. He spoke on how glorifying street life added to the violence that scarred Los Angeles for generations. It sounded like he was closing a chapter, almost like he was finally letting go of the gangster Snoop Dogg persona and stepping into Snoop Dogg, the elder statesman. But what happened next wasn't closure. It was the start of something way bigger, because right after that apology came the accusations. And the name that slipped out his mouth was one nobody thought he would ever say in that setting: Big U. The silence that followed in the courtroom was heavy enough to feel. It wasn't just that Snoop apologized, it was that he placed blame. And not on some stranger, not on an outsider, on someone from inside the circle. People raised in street codes knew immediately what had just unfolded. To outsiders, it might sound like Snoop was speaking his truth, but to anyone who understands how those streets work, what Snoop did was dangerous. He stepped into the territory of giving testimony. He broke the unspoken rule: no names, no cooperation, no betrayal of the brotherhood, even if those brothers are complicated individuals. Why does that word snitching carry so much weight? Because in Los Angeles, especially in the neighborhoods that raised both Nipsey Hussle and Snoop, credibility is everything. You can have money, fame, business deals, but if your credibility is gone, you're done. Respect runs the streets, and respect doesn't coexist with being labeled a snitch. That's why Snoop's words didn't land like a simple apology. They hit like a nuclear blast. The reason Big U's name creates such a reaction is because of who he was to Nipsey. In Nipsey's early days, Big U wasn't just a manager. He was the bridge between street life and the music industry. He gave Nipsey guidance, protection, and credibility. But relationships in that world are never clean or simple. They're built on mentorship, control, loyalty, and sometimes fear. And when Nipsey grew beyond the street foundation, when he turned into a businessman, an investor, a visionary, tension naturally came with that. Nipsey didn't need a street guardian the same way anymore, and that independence was both powerful and risky. The distance that formed between him and Big U became the perfect space for rumors to grow. When Nipsey was murdered, those rumors didn't just spread. They exploded through the streets like a spark hitting gasoline. Some people believed it was the tragic act of a jealous man, while others whispered about deeper betrayals, quiet politics, and hidden power moves that might have set everything in motion. Big U's name started circling heavy, not because anyone had proof, but because suspicion runs deep in neighborhoods where people believe the real danger sometimes comes from the hand you once trusted. Big U has never avoided speaking on those suspicions, though you can hear the weight in his voice every time he addresses them. He shuts the idea down completely, flipping it by saying the man who shot Nipsey wasn't real family, not truly part of the circle. It's his way of separating himself from the implication, like he's saying, "Don't blame me, don't blame us," because the shooter was never truly inside their world. But even with Big U denying it, the rumors stick to his name like glue. And when Snoop Dogg, of all people, breathed life back into that suspicion in a courtroom, it didn't just stick, it hardened like concrete. The impact of Snoop's accusation hits even harder because of the complicated relationship between Nipsey and Big U, a bond that Big U himself admitted wasn't always peaceful. When asked about their conflicts, Big U admitted disagreements happen, even between brothers. He brushed off one widely discussed incident as just a family matter that didn't need to be blown up. Those words sound protective, but they also reveal the truth about street family ties. These aren't dinner table disagreements. They're intense, emotional, and sometimes dangerous. They show the twisted mix of love and rivalry, where a person you call a brother one day might be seen as a threat the next. That's why, even with Big U insisting he had no part in anything, plenty of people still believe there was more to Nipsey's story than what hit the surface. And Snoop stepping in and heating up those doubts again? The impact cannot be overstated. For years, Snoop played both sides of the line. He could sit on a talk show cracking jokes with Martha Stewart, then remind Long Beach in another moment that he still held influence in his set. That ability to exist in two worlds gave him power, credibility, and reach. But when he stepped into that courtroom and said Big U's name out loud, he shattered the idea that he could walk both lanes without consequences. To some, what Snoop did looked bold, a sign of courage. To others, it was pure betrayal. And betrayal in Los Angeles is remembered forever. The label snitch isn't just an insult. It's a mark that doesn't fade, doesn't wash off, and doesn't get forgiven easily. In the neighborhoods where Snoop and Nipsey came from, being seen as a snitch means your word loses its value, your legacy gets rewritten, and your place in the culture collapses. The rules are tough, but they've been enforced with sharp precision for decades, and that's what makes Snoop's courtroom words so devastating. It doesn't matter whether what he said about Big U was true or not. It doesn't matter if he was trying to honor Nipsey or protect himself. What the community heard was testimony. And testimony is snitching, plain and simple. Now the fallout is unavoidable. Big U is back in defense mode once again, reminding everyone there's no paperwork, no evidence connecting him to Nipsey's murder. His voice in interviews sounds worn out but still standing strong, like someone who has repeated the same thing too many times but knows he has to keep going. For Nipsey's fans, the pain feels fresh again, the wound ripped open by Snoop's words. And for Snoop, the reputation he spent decades building may now be overshadowed by just one word: snitch. That's the tragedy of that courtroom moment. What could have been remembered as Snoop finally showing humility, finally apologizing for the past, is now remembered as the day he crossed a line Los Angeles doesn't forgive easily. It's remembered as the day Snoop Dogg pointed at Big U and gave the streets something they will never forget. Nipsey Hussle's presence has never left Los Angeles. Even years after his death, his name carries an energy that shifts entire crowds, a spirit that feels alive every time his music blasts down Crenshaw Boulevard. He wasn't just another artist lost to violence. He was a symbol of what could be achieved when someone from the community didn't run away, but reinvested and created something permanent for the next generation. That's why Snoop's words shook people so deeply, because his testimony didn't just accuse Big U, it pulled Nipsey's memory back into a storm of betrayal, conspiracies, and reopened wounds that never fully healed. Nipsey's final day has been retold by those closest to him, each time feeling like a cut reopening, impossible to close. To understand why the reaction was so strong, you have to understand what Nipsey represented. He was rare. someone who stayed rooted in the neighborhood that raised him, even when success gave him options far away. He bought property in Crenshaw, he built businesses, he gave jobs to people from his block. To fans, that was hero behavior, proof that you could rise without abandoning where you came from. But in the eyes of people who really understand the streets, staying home came with danger. Staying meant being visible. Staying meant the loyalty you show your neighborhood could one day turn into the very thing that puts you at risk. Nipsey knew the danger, and still he stayed. That truth hits hard. He believed it was his responsibility to remain in his neighborhood even though he understood violence followed him everywhere. And that's the heartbreaking part. The loyalty that made people love him also made him exposed in ways he never deserved. So when Snoop pointed the finger at Big U, it wasn't just about one man. It was a suggestion that Nipsey's loyalty to his circle might have been the exact thing that placed him in harm's way. When Nipsey Hussle was killed outside his Marathon clothing store in March 2019, Los Angeles didn't just mourn. The whole city felt like it stopped moving. But what happened in the days and weeks that followed showed the world that Nipsey's influence stretched far beyond Crenshaw and Slauson. Tributes poured in from neighbors, fans around the globe, and major figures in politics and entertainment, proving he was never just an artist. He was a builder, a visionary, a man who lived with intention. One of the most powerful moments came at his memorial service inside the Staples Center, which transformed into a massive place of remembrance. The arena usually meant for championships, and superstar concerts turned into a place of tears, love, and celebration. More than 20,000 people filled the seats, and millions more watched from home as the world honored him. Even former President Barack Obama sent a letter that was read to the audience, calling Nipsey an inspiration not just to Los Angeles, but to America. Those words meant something powerful, because they matched exactly how fans saw him. A man who stayed connected to the block even when success gave him endless ways out. The entire service was filled with emotion. Nipsey's partner, actress Lauren London, gave a heartbreaking tribute filled with love, strength, and memories they built together. His mother spoke with calm wisdom, urging people to look past the violence and remember her son as a man of light. Friends and collaborators like Snoop Dogg and YG shared stories that showed Nipsey not as a superstar, but as a brother, a friend, and a soldier who cared deeply about his people. Outside the Staples Center, thousands more gathered in the streets, blocks filled with murals, candles, flowers, and car caravans blasting Nipsey's music loud enough to shake the pavement. Windows were painted with messages like, "The marathon continues," and local artists turned his face into giant portraits across South LA, making him a permanent part of the city's identity. These murals weren't just art. They were declarations that Nipsey's presence would live forever. Tributes echoed everywhere, even at NBA games where players wore jerseys with Nipsey's name and number. Musicians honored him on stage, fans shared stories online, and people described moments where Nipsey showed kindness and generosity that never made headlines. It wasn't just his music they remembered. It was the way he invested in his people, opened businesses, and created opportunities for others. And that's why the reaction to Snoop's courtroom moment was explosive. Everyone understood exactly what he risked by saying Big U's name. Because in Los Angeles, the code is clear. You don't cooperate, you don't hand out names, and you don't put blame on someone in front of the system. The streets have a word for that, snitching, and it's the most dangerous label someone can carry. It doesn't just break ties, it destroys your credibility. And credibility for someone like Snoop is everything. The emotional fallout spread far beyond the courtroom. Fans hit social media with anger, confusion, and shock. Some said Snoop finally told the truth, saying too many powerful men stay silent while the community suffers. Others said he had ruined everything, calling him a hypocrite for claiming he represented the streets while breaking a rule that defines them. Meanwhile, Nipsey's family was caught in the middle, dealing with pain long before the public ever argued about it. For them, this wasn't a debate, it was heartbreak. They weren't thinking about headlines, theories, or online drama. They were mourning a son, a brother, a partner, and a father whose absence changed their lives forever. To the world, Nipsey had become a symbol, a face in conversations about loyalty, betrayal, and the street code. But to his family, He was simply a man they loved deeply. The person they cooked dinner with, laughed with, and dreamed with. And what made their pain even heavier was how his story never found peace. Every new claim, every rumor online, every accusation kept reopening the same wound again and again. Every time a new conspiracy got whispered on street corners, that wound ripped back open again. Instead of being allowed to mourn in peace, Nipsey's family had to relive the loss through speculation, rumors, and theories that twisted his story into something he never was. Their grief turned into a public spectacle the world kept picking apart. For Lauren London, losing Nipsey wasn't just losing a partner. It was losing the future they were building together. At his memorial, her shaking voice showed the heartbreak of having to raise their son in a world where his father was taken too soon, and someday explaining why. For Nipsey's mother, Angelique Smith, the pain carried double weight. She mourned her son while trying to hold her family steady and stand strong for a whole community looking to her for guidance and comfort. His brother, Samuel Black Sam Asghedom, had to balance his own heartbreak while carrying the responsibility of keeping Nipsey's vision alive through the Marathon clothing store and the businesses that Nipsey dreamed would lift the neighborhood. For Los Angeles itself, that moment was symbolic. Nipsey represented the idea that the cycle could be broken, that someone could rise above violence while still staying connected to the block. But his murder showed that escaping that cycle isn't simple. And now Snoop's courtroom testimony shows something else, that even people who survive long enough to become legends still face the weight of the street code. The streets don't forget, and they don't forgive. When the word snitch gets whispered, that label sticks like glue, no matter who you are. Whether you're a young hustler trying to make it or a superstar known around the world, the rules hit the same. Once that label lands on you, it can bury everything you built. So the question now hangs over the West Coast like a heavy storm cloud. Did Snoop change the narrative forever, forcing the culture to face the uncomfortable truth about loyalty and betrayal? Or did he bury himself deeper, trading decades of credibility for one moment of truth the streets might never accept? Nipsey Hussle's ghost stays in that question. His legacy lives in the music, in the businesses he built, in the murals painted on walls across Los Angeles. But his ghost also lives in the conversations about loyalty, betrayal, and the danger of speaking names out loud. Until that question finds an answer, Nipsey's spirit will keep haunting not just Snoop, not just Big U, but the whole city that raised them both. Now, so what are your thoughts on Nipsey's murder and Snoop Dogg's courtroom apology? Do you think Snoop finally revealed something real, or did he just add more pain and confusion to Nipsey's legacy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories just like this. The marathon continues, and I'll catch you in the next one.